Yeah, welcome everybody to, in case you're new, or maybe if you're welcome back from your little break, if you had one. Erin and I are excited to introduce our science communication through podcast team, and I'm going to have them do some introductions of who they are and what they've been doing. And I'm really looking forward to this one. We talked about this last night. Joe and I were talking about this last night, going, we've done this now 3 times, and Aaron and I have yet to see anybody else's stuff because we're always busy kind of doing our own thing. And now we're going. Now we get to learn from the master nerds when it comes to podcasts. So that's like such an honor to come back now a third time to do this and add Michael to the mix is awesome. So without further ado, we'll just hand it over to all of you, and yeah, looking forward to the session. So take it
Well,
away.
we appreciate the opportunity to talk today and to be back for a third time in the Share Fair. Apparently, Arthropod has not embarrassed itself enough yet, so we keep getting invited back. And we have brought our other co-host on today, Michael Scavarla. So I'm Jonathan Larson. I am an extension entomologist with the University of Kentucky. And my two co-hosts are also here today. I'll let them introduce themselves if Jody wants to go first.
Hi, I'm Jody Green. I'm an extension educator out of Omaha, Nebraska. So I work for Nebraska Extension in a county office. It's very strange.
This feels very like the intro to Arthropod, honestly. And I'm Michael Scavarla. I work at Penn State. I run the insect identification lab here.
It's different because none of us put our radio voice on to
It's
do
true.
it. Yeah. So what we want to talk about today is just some tips and tricks that we hope you can use in the future. If you want to start your own podcast, we have some things to share. I have a few slides just to show some equipment and talk about some of the different things that you can purchase to use. But then we really want to have a discussion and hear from everybody. We have some polls to see what your interest is in having a podcast and some of the things that have maybe stopped you from doing it in the past. We can share some of our trials and tribulations. We've each had our own moments of doubt. I think in the last talk, we heard Jason saying that there were times where he just wanted to destroy his own YouTube channel. And there have been times where I wanted to strangle the Arthropod logo to death and never deal with it again. But we'll try and talk about how you can get over some of those and avoid burnout and things of that nature. So I'll go ahead and do some sharing. You can see my grant that I've been working on. Oops. So like we said, we're the Arthropod team. These are our current photos for the show. And we love doing the podcast. It's always a lot of fun. And we just want to share why we think it's important for other extension professionals to maybe consider this as an option. In our opinion, podcasts are a really great tool for extension professionals. If you want to try a different form of extension, maybe something you haven't done before, it's relatively cheap. It's compared to things like videos and some of the other equipment that you can buy. A podcast to produce it is not as expensive as some of those things. And when you put a podcast out on the internet, it always surprises me just how people can find the show. There are dozens of different podcatcher apps out there. So once you release it into the Apple podcast platform, you'll get picked up by Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. I get emails sometimes, or people will tell me that they found the show on their favorite podcatcher app that I've never even heard of, and I had no idea that we were on. This is really fun just to find out that your words can be out there for everybody to listen to. It's also kind of terrifying to find out that it's so spread out, but it's something that's very helpful for extension professionals to amplify our information and amplify our voice. I think that a podcast helps you to multiply your efforts without necessarily making more field days and meetings. The information that we provide is the same that we would do in any kind of PowerPoint presentation. It's the same that we would do at a field day, but it's packaged just a little bit differently. You can also point to the fact that most podcasts are free. There are some that are behind paywalls. Maybe some of your favorite shows have a Patreon, or they're behind a little bit of a paywall in order to access them. But I think that helps you to get access to learners that you wouldn't previously have access to. It's something that they don't have to pay to go to the field day. They don't have to drive across the state to get to the meeting necessarily. And you're just opening that information up. I always joke that extension is some of the original social justice work, where we're opening up and making this sort of a big world where we can go in and share the science that we do. And I think podcasts are one way to help fulfill that mission. So if you've been thinking about it, those are some justifications I think can help if you're going to your bosses or to your administrators and they want to know why it is that you're doing this, or if they have sort of negative feelings about it. I know that I had one administrator tell me that my podcast idea was quote unquote cute, but he didn't understand why I wanted to do it. So I think that just pointing out some of these different factoids can help with those kinds of conversations. I think it's also important to recognize that an extension professional's life can be very fraught. It can be full of different phone calls and emails. You're trying to write grants in some cases, or you're trying to get out to different site visits. And it can be hard to always reach everybody in a timely fashion. And I think that podcasts, videos, the other things that we've been talking about throughout the Share Fair over the years are all really great ways to be available before they actually have to find you. So instead of calling you or emailing you, if you have a podcast out there or a video that they can watch, you can be right there right now. And maybe not necessarily cut them off at the pass, but after a fashion, you can sort of help to get them the information that they need when they want it, and help to save you some time in the long run without having to answer everybody's calls on a one-on-one basis. I always like to joke about that scene in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where the guy says that they're mass communicating. That's what we're trying to do with this kind of approach, is we want to reach as many people as possible as quickly as possible. There are definitely going to be some hurdles to clear in order to be successful, though. I know that when I've thought about making podcasts in the past, or when I've talked to people before doing the Share Fair, these are the kinds of things that people are worried about when they're considering making a show. And so some people have asked, how will I record it? How do I actually get the audio down? Where am I going to put it on the internet? Or what does that even mean? Like, do I just put it on the internet and then the internet does its thing and I get famous and suddenly have my own trophy that I get from the podcast awards? How do I format it? How do I make a show? How do I find co-hosts, or do I interview guests? What does it look like? Or what does it sound like, I guess would be a better way to put it. And then who's going to listen to it? And why should I do this? Why should I invest my time? We're going to try and go through all those here today. If we've got some of the polls that we can throw out there, maybe people can say if they've considered making a show before, and if any of these things have confronted them and sort of slowed them down from doing it. Cool. Yeah. So let's see what people say.
Yeah, so I just launched this poll. Have you ever considered starting a podcast? Hopefully it's yes, because you're here today. And then if you wanted to but didn't, and you can choose multiple. So
cool.
So can everyone see all the changes?
Yeah, I'm watching it move
Okay,
around.
good.
It's like election night a couple weeks ago, or whenever that was.
This is much less nerve-wracking, to be quite honest.
So it kind of seems like lots of folks have considered doing this before, and that some of the reasons it looks like it's pretty even split. I like this other answer. Made a lot of unnecessary excuses. We're not drill sergeants, Jody. They can have a valuable excuse. But it sounds like lots of the other common stuff. Didn't know how to record it, didn't know how to publish it. Some people have said there's no support from administration. We've all dealt with some of those, I would say, right, Mike and Jody?
Yeah, I mean, my department head now is, I think he likes that I do podcasting, and he looks at the stats that I give him, like for my yearly review, and it's like, oh yeah, that's great. But beyond that, it's hard to like contextualize what those stats mean to him and upper admin.
Right.
So it's not that I have a lack of support. It's just they don't know what to make of it, I think. But yeah, we've certainly encountered a lot of these issues ourselves.
Is it okay if I end the poll, Jody? Oh, cool. All right. You already did it. So we'll try and go through some of these here today and just talk about, and I'm going to start by talking about some of that equipment. I think that the first step for equipment in particular is to determine your budget. That will help you to figure out what you're going to buy and what you're going to use to record yourself and where you're going to host the podcast. If you're like me, your extension wallet looks a lot like the picture here. and it's got moths flying out of it. So you have to try and figure out some of these cheaper methods or find some of the technology that's a little bit cheaper, but still sounds good. I will tell you that if you want to generate a podcast basically for free, as long as you have a computer, then you can do that. You can use the built-in microphone of your computer. You can use Zoom. Mike is going to talk here in a little bit about how to use Zoom to actually capture some of the audio that you would get in a Zoom call. And then you can post your audio to a place called the Internet Archive if you haven't used it before. It's a free hosting service, and you can get all of the feeds that you need from the Internet Archive, and you can post it to a blog, and it will cost you whatever it costs for you to have your computer and whatever time you put into it. But there are also some things out there that can help you to sound a little bit more professional and can help to take some of the stress off in terms of where to post your podcast. So if your budget will allow, you can purchase some different audio equipment to improve your sound quality. I have 3 audio clips. Hopefully you'll be able to hear them. So you can hear in this first one, this is my internal microphone on my laptop.
How now, brown cow.
Okay. So that's inside my computer. You can hear how it sounds. It's not the greatest. Mike thinks it's funny. I'm doing my
I hadn't heard
exercise.
that before.
You've never heard how red, yellow,
No,
red
I
leather,
haven't.
yellow leather?
No, I have. I have not heard these clips before, so that's amusing.
After that, we have a USB based microphone. So this would be your Snowballs and your Yetis and things like that, or the one like I have today, which is a podcast with a podcast mic with an arm. Looks a little more like a radio station kind of setup.
How now, brown cow.
So it sounds a little less tin canny. You can compare that to the final one I've got here, which is with a external mic built into or plugged into an audio mixer.
How now, brown
So
cow.
with that one, you're seeing that it's pretty amplified. It's not turned up super loud on me because I already have a loud voice, but you're getting some of the background noise you'll have to edit out. But ultimately, your voice will be very crisp and clear with that compared to that first one in particular. We'll just replay that.
How now, brown
So you sound
cow.
a little far away, a little tin canny, but you can get rid of some of that with a USB mic, which can be bought for like $25 up to $150, depending on your budget. It'll sometimes come with the mic cover that you might need or the pop filter. And then you can also look at the microphone with a stand and the audio mixer that you see on the right. That's something that would be anywhere between $50 and $300. You can even get up into like the $900 or $1,000 range if you work at somewhere really cool, like, I don't know, the University of Florida, where everybody's just flush with cash. Maybe you can purchase something like that. But in terms of the options, they are wide and varied. You can determine what's going to work for you in terms of quality and what's going to work for your budget.
How now.
Nobody
How
wants to hear
now.
that.
How now.
There we go. All right. If you want to get a mixer, we do have a mixer for our show. I can show that off a little bit later. And the mixer just allows you some opportunity to do amplification or to control the levels of different people that are involved. This is a picture from when I used to work in Nebraska with Jody. So Jody and I would be sitting at a table. I would have my own microphone. Jody would have her own microphone. They would both go into the mixer. And then we would feed Mike from the computer into the mixer through an audio cable. If you look, I'll highlight it right here. You can see where everything's getting plugged in. So I had control over my voice level. I had control over Jody's voice level and Mike's. Sometimes when you're feeding things in through Skype or through Zoom and you're trying to get guests onto the show, those levels can come through really low. So it's helpful to have something to amplify them. You can also, if you are like me and are loud, you can turn yourself down. And you can turn somebody like Jody up who maybe is speaking a little more quietly compared to you. If you do some post editing with these as well, you can equalize some of the voices with a program called Levelator. That's very helpful, I think, in terms of getting the audio to sound pretty equal across the whole hosting spectrum. Some other things that you might have to buy would include the audio cables. If you've got a microphone that's going into a mixer, you'll want microphone stands if they don't come with their own arms. You'll want pop filters. It looks like a windscreen on a bendable frame so that you can block some of your spittle from getting onto your microphone. It also sort of quiets some of the P's and Q's that you may produce with your vocalization. You might look at some microphone covers. I think headphone splitters are really nice. If you look at the fourth picture from the left, that's a splitter where one end you plug into your audio jack, your headphone jack, and then you can route the audio from there to other people's headphones that are maybe with you recording, as well as take audio from a computer into the mixer. You'll also need some adapters. You'll have to take what looks like your normal headphone jack and turn it into a jack that can fit into the mixer. And that adapter on the far right there will help you to do that. I think all of these things are out there on Amazon. They're pretty easy to find. They can be pretty cheap. Some of them can go up pretty high. If you're buying a windscreen or a pop filter, it goes up to about $70. And you can get even more specialized ones, which kind of go around your head and help to enclose all of your sound and keep out external sound out. And you look kind of like a sci-fi character, maybe like the people from Among Us. But all of these can help with the different audio things that you're trying to do. I was going to say, there are some places that you can host your podcast. I know that was one of the other things that it sounded like people had some trouble with. We do a very complicated procedure involving Internet Archive, because when I got started with this, it was the cheapest way to go. But I'm actually thinking about changing our procedure for the show. And we're going to be maybe signing up with one of these podcast services, and it's called anchor.fm. You can see its logo in the lower corner there. They are free. You upload your audio with them, and they actually sort of do everything that you need. They'll generate a feed for you. You can submit the feed to iTunes or to Apple Podcasts, as it's called now. And then all of those other podcatcher apps usually feed off of Apple Podcasts. So once you get it in there, you're golden to get caught on those other ones. There are other options out there, though, to do this where you upload. There are things called Podbean, Captivate, Buzzsprout, Blueberry. If you want to do a WordPress blog in association with your podcast so that you can have show notes and things like that, Blueberry will be your option there. These do cost money in most cases. You can do a little bit for free, like maybe one show a month for free on some of them. But if you start paying $5 to $20 a month, you can upload more audio. They'll do more services for you. It just depends on what your budget really allows for. So after that, it looked like we were having lots of different questions pop up in the chat, and I don't want to just keep going on and on. So Jody or Mike, what do you have to say?
One thing Tim Crane pointed out, hi Tim, I haven't talked to you in a while, is that you can use other justifications for purchasing some of this equipment. So using a teaching budget, or if you're using the equipment for teaching a remote class, or dipping into your research budget in justifying that by saying like your podcast or whatever audio you're putting out is promoting your research. And especially given the COVID crisis, like I'm teaching remotely. I imagine most of us, if we're teaching, are teaching remotely. So, if you can't afford the equipment on an extension budget, maybe you can afford it on a teaching budget and then dual purpose it. Because it's audio equipment. You can use it for recording everything.
Jonathan, did you see the question from Jason about the advantage of a hosting site versus archive.org?
So hosting sites, since they're a little more dedicated, then you're going to get more consistent service from them. With the Internet Archive, since it's free, they do have outages sometimes, and that can lead to people being unable to find your show. And some of those other value-added services that they have would include generating the feed for you and all those kinds of things. So it makes it a lot simpler. The anchor.fm, I was playing around with it just a couple of days ago when I was thinking about switching our show, and it just seems so much easier to do than what I normally go through, which is upload the Internet Archive, get a audio HTML code, put it in a blog spot, all this other stuff. I have to take out security codes and stuff from there just so people can access it. And all of that is gone when you use the hosting service. So it seems like it's a lot simpler, and you get more of a dedicated service where people won't miss out on your show because the archive has to go down for a day.
But archive is free.
It is free.
And I think with like Anchor, you do have to pay for it if you put out so many shows a month, or hit a internal memory cap that they have. Do you want me to show everybody how to capture audio if you're doing it locally? Okay.
Yeah, like I don't know where to start. Like where people. I mean, what I have one more poll about what kind of podcasts people like to listen to if they do listen, because sometimes that helps shape what kind of podcast you would like to produce. So I've got this poll here. If you can answer this, maybe this will change, guide you to a certain type of podcast. But I've been doing a lot of searching through the podcast catchers for different entomology podcasts, and they're all different. And I mean, there are a lot that I have in my subscription, and it's changed a little bit through this pandemic because I don't get in a car and drive, which is where I usually listen to most of my podcasts.
Jody, what's the average length of one of your podcasts, like a typical one?
Yeah, so we try to aim for 45 minutes to an hour. We tried to make it a little shorter. I think one of the things that, I mean, there's a lot of steps to go through before you start a podcast. And I mean, Erin, I listen to your podcast. I'm your subscriber.
We tease, we have one listener.
Yeah, and I'm always like, that's me. They're talking to me. It's the Soybean Pest podcast. But you guys don't edit yours, do you?
It's very, very lightly edited, only if like a phone call or like a horn goes off or something. But generally, we don't do much to it. Not like you guys.
Okay, so, and that's what takes up a lot of our time. So we'll talk about that later too. But I think like Brian talked about yesterday about the time it takes. And so we edit it. And I would say like when I edit, maybe I'm really slow, but it's like 10 minutes of podcast probably takes at least an hour. So it depends. So when you start your podcast, that's one thing to think about if you want it heavily edited or if it's a conversation or whatnot. But it looks like, it's almost kind of split between, 10 to 20 minutes or longer. And it really depends. But, and it looks like podcasts with guests and conversational tone. So good to know. Okay, Mike.
Well, I guess we can talk about this for a little bit since we put the poll up. Just how do people decide on what kind of format that they want, the kind of questions that they need to think about? And like, so John started Arthropod by himself a couple years ago, and then about 30 episodes in, brought me in as a co-host. So this is like, I never really had to think about much of this because John had already set it up and got the ball rolling.
Yeah, it's the poll was really interesting to see, just because I think that helps to show you that you're never going to make everybody happy, and you're not going to get everybody to listen to your show. Some people want it long, some people want a really short one, and they'll tell you about it. Like I've had people come up to me at ESA meetings in the past and say, "Oh, I found your podcast, but your shows are like 60 minutes long, and I only want something that's 10 minutes long while I'm in the car or on the subway, and I don't want that." But you have to make it. So you have to figure out what it is that you want, and you have to figure out how long you want to talk for and what you want to talk about. If you try to do it alone, you may find that that's difficult. That was my experience, at least. I started Arthropod by myself in 2014 or 15. And I had this whole idea in my head that it was going to be sort of like a laugh a minute kind of thing where I would read a script and I was going to pretend that I was a late night host and that I had a band that was with me, and that they were, what was I going to call them? It was like the Bombas Five or something like that. I was going to pretend that I had this band of bumblebees that was with me. And then you sit down to do it and you are like, wait, people are going to hear me acting a fool on the internet and they're going to talk about it. So you can have a lot of feelings and emotions that go into it. I think that doing it alone can be hard if you're not willing to sit down and really go through it and go through a script and sort of reckon with the fact that nobody's going to laugh when you tell a joke. You're never going to know how people are reacting to what it is that you're saying. If you can deal with that, that's great. But for me, I needed other people on. So I started having guests on a lot where we could have a conversation. And then I found it was hard to get guests. It seems like scientists, when you say, "Hey, I want to put a microphone in your face and talk to you for an hour," even if it's about what they do, they seem to blanch a little bit. So I decided that Jody and Mike should be on the show with me, and having co-hosts has made life a lot better. So those are just some things I think you need to consider: is how are you going to talk, who are you going to talk to, and the length of time that you want to go for. Erin has a co-host as well.
Yeah. Well, there's probably disadvantages too to having us, because it's like, probably for you, it's like herding cats, because we are just so excited to see each other most of the time. But I think at this time, with a lot of us doing Zoom and doing things remotely, maybe we're more used to not getting those laughs. And so I think this is a good time for people to start podcasts and people to start listening.
I just saw a question pop up about how much time it takes to edit. It depends, I guess, on what is going on. But Jody, I think you said for every 10 minutes, it takes you an hour.
Yeah. And I don't know about if it's the same as you, because we probably have our own maybe standards. And so if it's more conversational and the person, it's okay to have a little bit of ums. But I feel like sometimes I get blown away by my conversations, and I'm going off, like, we don't really have a script, a lot of it, right? We're having a conversation, we have what we want to talk about. But if a guest or someone in the, is interviewing, we're talking, it might get a little crazy, and we might have to take a lot of the stuff that's not relevant to what we wanted our topic. We might take that out.
I tend to think of it as for every hour, it's 2 hours of editing. That seems to be the time frame that it takes me, like double whatever our recording time was. That's how much time it takes me to cut everything out. The ums, the pauses, the swear words from Jody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends who's also probably hosting. I'm probably the worst.
No.
But we are our worst critics. And we can talk about the things like the downfalls of podcasting. I never thought I would be podcasting. So like, just even hearing my own voice was very horrible at a time.
Yeah, it takes me about 2 times to 3 times, like John was saying, to edit a podcast. And I typically am just cutting out ums and tongue clicks and long pauses, like that.
And you probably wouldn't even think about those things until you do a podcast.
Yes.
And you see I don't know what it's called, but you can see I do that whenever I start talking, and that annoys me about myself. Like, I see it, and you can cut it out when you're editing. But and another thing that I do, well, we all pick our things that we know we do. And I will do this. And that's terrible for a podcast. You want to do short clips or sound bites. But when I'm thinking, my sound, I like drag out certain words. So you learn about the things that annoy you about yourself that aren't good for podcasting. So it's good in a way. It's like recording your presentation so you can be a better presenter. So you'll learn some things about yourself.
Well, and kind of going off that, just about the time going into it, deciding on your format is going to help determine how much time goes into it. So if it's just you interviewing somebody, like you'll want to spend some time like diving into their work, so you know what questions to ask, or you have an idea of how to steer the conversation, and maybe have an outline of how you want the conversation to go. We do that and then almost never follow it, because conversations are fluid and change. But if you're doing something more like a hardcore history, where it's you pontificating in front of a microphone about a story and reading a script, like building that script is going to take a lot more research and a lot more time than just having a conversation with somebody. So depending on the format that you think the podcast is going to take is going to really help determine how much time and energy you have to put into it up front. Part of the reason we do interviews is because they're reasonably easy to do on the fly. Like, you find somebody to interview, spend a couple minutes learning about them, and then go talk to them and come up with interesting questions to steer the conversation. But so it's a lot less energy and input up front.
But some things to think of. Go ahead.
Oh, you can't see it.
Oh, you got your hand. Some things to think about if you're going to invite guests on are that it's good to have an outline for them. It's good to give them anything that you can so they feel more comfortable joining you. anything that can make them feel like, oh, okay, I know what I need to say or what I need to have prepared. And that will make them feel more at ease. And it gives you more opportunity for these conversation fountains, like Mike described, where things start to go off on one hand or the other. And maybe you get off the script a little bit, but it helps them to feel comfortable coming onto the show and makes them more willing to do that, I think, if you are able to prepare them up front.
We actually have a lot of, like, I see Caleb's in here and Amy, like there's a lot of people that we've interviewed, Lauren, that are here and supporters of our show, and they were so fun to have on, right? So we get energy. Hi, Caleb. We get energy from them, and we don't know what we start talking about. But if anyone has like certain questions, please feel free to enter that in the chat, and we can go with that. We want to be able to help you build your podcast, and we want to help you share that. So whatever your unnecessary, I put unnecessary because maybe it's, our own thoughts of our inabilities or whatever, but so yeah, frequency of episodes. We were pretty good with the two a month. And I think it's really important to have like a regular schedule so listeners will be on board. We just kind of had a problem and we fell off our schedule because we were so busy.
We didn't have a problem. I am teaching insect taxonomy this fall, which has been crazy because it's a lab heavy course and I'm teaching it remotely. And Jody went up for promotion. So 2 of the 3 of us became extraordinarily busy. And so we had to pause everything for a little bit. It's not a problem. It's just podcasting took a back seat because other things became more important for this semester.
Good. We're getting a lot of questions.
So frequency, I think once a month is the minimum that you'd want to shoot for. 2 times a month is probably the gold standard, the best that you can do. And if you want to be really ambitious, a weekly podcast, you're going to accumulate a ton of grist for the mill, and people will be finding you all the time and listening to you all the time, and they'll know that they can trust that you're going to be there for them. So that would be awesome. But you might find that it also gets kind of exhausting because you're talking about 10 to 20 hours of time, depending on how long your show is. I know some people have done 1 a week, but they do like a 5 to 10 minute thing where they read a poem or read a story they wrote up for the news. And that's different. It's just all about what makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah, we found with doing an hour, 45-minute to an hour-long show twice a month is good. If you're doing once a week, you may want to consider doing a shorter, like 10 to 30-minute show, just because it is a lot of effort. And honestly, it's a lot of mental capacity trying to come up with a different show every week. We struggle sometimes to even come up with a new show topic, having them twice a month.
Tamra asked how we came up with the logo and the intro and outro music for the show. The logo, if you haven't seen it before, it's a bug with headphones on. And I tried to draw it in Microsoft Paint and it looked awful. So I sent it to my friend who's a graphic designer, and he gave me a sweetheart deal, a friendship deal, and said that he would draw it for us for $30. And he took what I had made and made it look a little more professional. But you can find open source icons out there, things that you can use. I don't know who made the Be the Nerd logo out of Erin and Brian, but that looks like something that you could put together if you wanted to make a podcast logo to me.
Yeah, we got professional help from a company called 99 Designs.
Okay.
And, but yeah, even I've had good luck with asking if you have a art department or like graphic design. Sometimes the grad students or like seniors are looking for fun projects, and if you give them a little bit of inspiration, sometimes they can be really creative with that. Awesome.
But never go to these people and say like, oh, you'll get cool exposure because it'll be for an entomology podcast. That's not really fair to them. They're artists. They deserve to be compensated for their work in some fashion, whatever it is that you work out with them. So that's how we got the logo. The music, it came from a site called Incomptech, which is a royalty-free music site where you can find lots of different things that the creator that runs that site, I think his last name is McLeod, he lets you use his music for your podcasts or videos, different things that are out there. and I wanted something that sounded like a 1970s detective show, and he had exactly what I wanted, and that's what I picked. And then we had a friend that also put some stuff in that's introducing us, where he sounds like a late night introduction host thing, where he calls us the greatest insect podcast, or what, I don't remember what all Brad says in it, but the music is sufficient usually if you want to put that in there.
Yeah, and oh, go on.
Yes. So hi, my name is Isabelle Fréchette, and I'm talking from Quebec, Canada. And I had the idea of having a podcast for the IPM network for field crop in Quebec. And from like what I had comments that I received was, first of all, I had a colleague who said, well, we talk about insect pests or weeds and disease, and they won't have pictures. So did you have that comment, like how come you could talk about these topics and not showing pictures, or like, that was my first question. And my second question is that I had access to a focus groups of producers, and from what I had is that they don't even know what is a podcast. So I was wondering if you're like producers in states listening to podcast, and because I thought like it's super interesting for them, because they could listen to the podcast in the tractor, and also for the agronomists, they can hear it, and they do a lot of cars. They spend a lot of time in cars, so I thought it was really exciting. But I don't know, it seems that I'm the only one excited about it, and I would have your advice to convince people around me.
I think you should totally do it. And when you promote it, you have a website, and if they want to see the pictures, you giving them the information. Jonathan always says, like, information in your ear holes. So they're just getting it in a different way. And then when they get to their computer, they can get to your website where you're hosting that, where that podcast is. They can listen to it again. They can see the links and the resources that you've provided, like that you've mentioned in that podcast. You can see pictures and images, and then that will all be there. So it will complement each other. And I think over time, when they listen to your first couple, they'll be hooked, and it'll be something they look forward to. And yeah, I would say go for it. I think it's a great idea. Mm-hmm. And go Canada.
Did you add that comment? Did you already have this comment, or nobody said that?
Isabel, this is Erin. I have a podcast that's directed towards like farmers and crop consultants. And what I find is that they really like the podcasting format, because if they subscribe, they can get a new episode like pushed to their phone. And that way, if they are driving around places without internet access, they can still get the content. And then they seem to really like that, because they are on the road a lot. So I think it's a nice feature for them to stay in the loop with like real time. If you're doing like pest and scouting updates, it's a way for them to keep in the loop.
Yeah.
Erin? Do you know how much producers are subscribers to your different podcasts? Yeah, but can you?
I don't know how many are farmers or how many are not farmers. We haven't done like a metrics.
But yeah, you've heard great comments from producers. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, they seem to like the audio, because they are driving around so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and with Erin's podcast, it's very up to date, and it's like what's going on with the weather, what you're seeing in the field, when you might need to treat. I mean, I'm not in agri-crops, but I'm interested in what everyone is doing, and I just think that's very useful, especially for her growers across Iowa. And they talk about Nebraska too. So, it's relevant. And I think I should say that they've had like 11 seasons. So they've been around for a long time. So I think it's a great idea for your job.
Thank you.
Okay.
And there seems to sorry, if we could build on that, there seems to be a related question about metrics of success and how to report those for where relevant. So for like extension or whatever, it seems to fit. Like, who's your audience? How do you know you're making an impact? Like, are there any other kind of tips or tricks you can share?
Is that me? Is that what you Jody,
Well,
is
I
that what
don't
you're
know.
looking
I don't know.
at?
Don't look at me. I'm just
she
helping
w-
moderate here.
she was like looking directly into my soul. It's one of those hard ones, right? With social media and some of this stuff, when we talk about metrics to report up, you're often just talking straight numbers with something like a podcast. So how many downloads or how many subscribers can you find? And those metrics, depending on the service you use, can be easy to find or can be hard to accrue. So if you used Anchor.fm, or if you use some of those other programs we talked about, they will tell you usually how many subscribers you have or how many downloads or listens you've had in a month. But for some of the other ones, you have to go through and look at different podcatchers, see how many subscribers you have. I would say that based on putting everything together, we probably have about 1,000 listeners an episode for Arthropod. And we haven't done a assessment of them. That's something that is a goal of mine, is to have a survey that we try to recruit them to fill out. We would put it at the end of an episode, say, hey, go to this link, put it in the show notes, and hear back from who they are, what they do, and why they're listening. But I think that we'll get low numbers with that, but you'll still get some information. It'll be a lot like most extension surveys where your in won't be super impressive, but I still think it's important information to try and dig out. But for the most part, you're just getting those straight numbers. You're not finding out behavior change or practice adoption necessarily just from producing the podcast. But it's something that builds recognition for your program. It builds recognition for the data that you're talking about, like Isabel was mentioning. If she wants to talk about IPM in these field settings, if you're putting that information out there, you're getting people aware of what you're doing, and maybe they'll be more willing to buy in. And then when they see that you're speaking or hear about an event that you're hosting, they'll be like, oh, I remember hearing that on a podcast, and maybe they'll be more willing to come and tune in and go to your event actually. So they'll be able to fill out surveys and things there. That's kind of how I've been pitching it, at least. I don't know if Jody or Mike have different advice or what their experiences have been.
No, similar experiences for me. Like I said, I just report the raw numbers, like number of episodes downloaded and our assumed audience size when I do like my interview review stuff, because we don't have a lot of other information about our audience to report. And I guess something about Arthropod is we do change like the format a little bit. Like we jump between interviews with like other entomologists or other scientists, and we're starting to try to get more scripted kind of shows out there. John did a 2-parter on DDT. That was a lot of fun to make. But we're often talking about kind of broad entomological topics. So like it might be of interest to producers one episode and then not for the next. So where I'm not sure where I was going with that.
Okay, I was gonna go through. I want to make sure we get some of these questions. So we talked about the editing software, but there was one other thing. Oh, Jason had asked about our workload. I don't know. Do you think we split it up pretty evenly? I know I volunteer to edit episodes that I think I did really bad, so I can edit a lot of my stuff out, which is probably cheating. But I'm bad.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant. Sorry,
but can I tell you what I love to do? I love cutting out the pieces of the three of us just laughing and laughing. And I put that in my own little podcast, and it's called Jody's Happiness Podcast. And whenever I'm feeling sad, I just play this thing of the three of us laughing, and it makes me so much happier. Like I do have friends somewhere. And I've listened to it a lot. Some days I'll just text them and I'll be like, I'm listening to my happiness podcast. Like when we're being real and I just, we're just talking, and I'm sure like we miss those relationships with our coworkers. And I mean, I worked with Jonathan for years. I only see Mike at ESA and a lot of you. So, it's hard, but I think we do share the work equally. And
yeah. This semester has been rough because I've been so busy with teaching. I feel like you two have picked up most of my slack. But I feel like before August or July, I feel like we split it up pretty evenly. Because it is a lot for one person to produce a podcast even every 2 weeks, on top of every other thing that we've got to do. But producing one every 6 weeks is not that bad when we've got a cast of 3 of us. And it also does mean that like if I'm busy or John's busy or Jody's busy, like maybe we'll just have two of us on the podcast and interview, some other person, or maybe it's just a one-on-one interview with like me and somebody else at Penn State or something, depending on everybody's schedule, because people get busy, and with three of us, we can usually find one of us at least that is available every 2 weeks to get it done.
Do we want to get into our software for editing? Because that's pretty.
Yeah, we've only got about 13 minutes left. So yeah, I can talk about that real quick. So we use a free program called Audacity to capture the audio. John, you use it, but when we're doing it online, you run it through a mixer, right?
Right. The mixer is what's getting the audio from the audio jack, and then the Audacity is capturing it locally on my computer so that I can edit it later.
John's the only one of us that has a mixer. So like if I'm doing interviews and using Audacity, if I'm running it, then I'm typically doing like in-person, well, not now with COVID. Pre-COVID, I would do in-person interviews like in my office with people that would come by. But we use Audacity for capturing the audio sometimes and then editing. The other thing that we can do, especially if you've got institutional access, is to use Zoom. If you're the host of a Zoom meeting, you can record the audio and visuals, but you're really after the audio with that. And it's really easy to do. You have less control over the audio quality because you're just using whatever like Zoom spits out at you at the end. So you have less control over like making John quieter and making Jody louder by using the mixer, but you can change a lot of that even still post-process. So actually, and we may just move towards using Zoom for audio capture anyhow, because everybody's so used to using Zoom now anyhow. I've got, if you don't know how to capture audio in Zoom, I'm going to screen share here. I took a video of myself doing this.
Because if you were having a meeting in Zoom and you were interviewing, it splits that audio. And so like even I had an interview with someone, I didn't think that it was even going to be turned into a podcast. And I took that audio and converted it, which Mike will show. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the one problem with using Zoom to capture audio is that it outputs the audio as an MP4 file. And Audacity, this free program that we're using, only reads WAV files. So you do have to convert the audio files. It's not hard. If you just Google convert MP4 to WAV, there's a bunch of free websites that you go in, you drop the audio file, you wait a minute, and then it spits it out in the proper format. So it's not difficult, but it is an additional step. There's also, I got one, what's it called? Audio converter, any format from the Windows 10 program library thing. But I'm going to screen share again and show you Audacity. Here it is. So here's what Audacity looks like. Go away, chat. And Audacity is easy enough to use. I'm just going to hit record. You can see that it's picking up the audio of me speaking right here. We'll add in there's a tongue click. Here's an and then we keep talking. So we'll stop there. And so in Audacity, basic editing functions are really easy. So you can see the audio right here. I've stared at this long enough, and if you start editing podcasts, you'll start to see these too. Just looking at it, like this bit right here, I know that's a tongue click. But if you click right before you hit play, you can hear the tongue click. We highlight it, hit backspace, it cuts it out. I can see that this is probably an So you go there, hit play so you can listen to it. Okay, I've confirmed that that's an So you can zoom in on the audio so you can get a little finer control. Highlight the delete it. And now I've done a rough editing pass on this software, and you can save and export this as different audio files. We usually work in WAV files because a lot of programs use that. So that's Audacity. You can do other things like drop in your intro and outro musics is a separate audio file in here. But otherwise, it's that easy to use. You just hit record, maybe do some light editing for it.
Yeah, and Brian asked about multiple sound files, so you can have a bunch in there, and as long as they're like the type of file you can put in there, like a WAV file, you just put it in there, or you can cut. I don't know. I usually have different Audacity windows open with the different sound clips, and I would cut in like certain things from interviews when I had to, and put things around, move things around. So
yeah, here I'll get in the background. I'll get one set up to show you how to drop in the intro and outro. Because I've got one. My 5-year-old saw me podcasting one day and decided that he really wanted to make his own podcast. So we've been recording a podcast where he talks about trains, and he has his own intro and outro music. So I'll screen share Audacity again. So here's just a test audio that I recorded a while ago. Here is my son's intro and outro music. I'll drag and drop it in. So you can see the way I've formatted this, it's all in one. The intro and outro is all down here. There's the intro, here's the outro. And I've formatted it so it's got some space between it so I can play with it. And so we'll expand everything. That's the outro. We'll come down here to the intro. To move files, to move the sound around can be a little difficult, but if you can copy and paste silence. So we're just gonna paste a bunch of silence up here at the beginning. That looks reasonably lined up. So you can see there's some silence. Here's the intro music. It fades out, and then here is me beginning to speak. This is a short podcast. It's only 30 seconds. So how do we get the outro music back down here? Well, let's make it smaller. We take all this empty space, line it up, delete. And you just line it up. There is the outro music overlapping the end of this podcast. Oop, wrong way. And so there we go. Here's a bit of silence, the intro music, a little bit of talking up here. That is the podcast. Obviously, if you're recording an hour-long podcast, it's going to be much, much longer. That fades out, and then here's the fade in with the outro music. And there you go. You just save that with the two audio files there. When you export it as a WAV file, it condenses everything into one file, and you're good to go.
One other Audacity tip that I would share, Mike, if you click on effect.
Yeah, I can do that.
So when we record, I make sure that before we actually get started with the show, we've had our talking session, our happy session, whatever Jody's going to turn into our happy podcast. And then I say, okay, we're going to take 5 seconds of no talking. And it captures all the ambient noise that each of us are producing. So whatever weird buzzes, clicks, and whirs are happening around you, it gets captured. You can then highlight that later, go to effect, and then go to noise reduction.
Can you see the things that are popping up as I click on them?
Yeah.
Okay.
You'll say get noise profile. It'll take all that ambient noise and recognize it. Then you hit Control A to get everything. And then you hit effect again. Noise reduction one more time. And then say okay. And it will run your noise reduction so that it removes all those weird sounds that have been picked up by all of your different microphones, and it suppresses them to a more manageable level so people don't get annoyed, hopefully, when they're listening to you. It's not going to fully remove everything. If somebody is in the background quacking like a duck, it'll be a very quiet quack, but it won't be completely gone.
There's something else that you can do, and I'm not sure how well I'll export this as a WAV file onto my desktop. I'm going to stop screen sharing and then do a new screen share of just my screen. Hopefully this works. Something else that you can do, there's a program called Levelator that is, again, free. And you can see it right here. And you open it up. It's just this little pop-up right here. And what you can do is drag and drop a WAV file on this, and it levels out the volume. So it takes all the really loud things and drops the audio down on those, and takes quiet things and boosts the audio on those. So you can see my test file up here. You just drag and drop it. Levelator, it does its thing. And then it outputs an output of that with everything levelated so that you can go on to edit this. Typically, I kind of went out of order here because somebody asked about intro and outro music. We generally will do the editing and then levelate everything to get the audio file for the actual podcast finished. And then after all of that is done, then add the intro and outro music, because you don't want to levelate the music, because that could start to make it sound a little bit funny. But if you have institutional access, Zoom is free. That's an easy way to record audio. Audacity is free if you're recording things in person. Levelator is free. We do most of our podcast on a shoestring budget, because what is out there and freely available, it's not going to sound like a professionally produced podcast necessarily. We're not doing hardcore history here, but it's good enough. And to take it to the next level would take more money and time than we're willing to put in.
We don't have sponsors.
That's true.
We don't say that every podcast is brought to you by My Pillow or whatever. There was one other question.
Sounds like Kring has money, though. I think Kring was saying he's got all this kind of money. I mean, he's
send someone of that up here.
Maybe I misinterpreted that. Sorry.
Brought to you by Tim.
Get your hopes up.
Welcome to Arthropod, brought to you by Tim Kreen of Virginia Tech University.
Hey, you know what? You brand it that way, we'll talk.
Yeah, right. I was like, you better be careful what you say there, John.
One of the other questions I definitely wanted to hit that I saw in the chat was, how do we promote the show? We generally use Twitter to get the word out. We also post on Facebook. One of the things I really like about podcasts in particular is that people, when they find them, they can share them themselves. And so I've just done little perusals of the internet sometime to see if people are talking about Arthropod. Usually I'm pretty happy, and I see that people are saying nice things about us. Other times I find a post on Reddit that's about how dumb we are. But you can see those kinds of things out there if you want to look around. And people with these kind of podcasts or infographics, all these other, I guess, 21st century extension materials we're making, videos included, they can share them, and we're making the public our marketing arm in a way. They're helping us by spreading the word about what we produce.
Sorry, I'm teaching in 5 minutes, so I gotta go. I'm so sorry. But my two colleagues, if you've got any last minute, 1 minute questions, I'm sure we'll be happy to help. Thanks everybody for having me here. Have a good ESA.
Hi, Mike.
Thank you, Sheriff Air Crew, for having us back.
Okay, but I think, well, can we have like 1 minute? This is our
Yeah. No, I just
goal.
want to make sure that those that are kind of going out is that they've got, go for it. I'm recording.
Anyone who is interested in making a podcast and wants to do it, please let us know if we can help you. I mean, we're not experts, obviously, you can tell. And I'm sure Brian and Erin are like, this is what they've done for 3 years. It's different. It's different.
It's awesome.
But we would like to help you. So if you are willing to start a podcast and get that going in the next 2 months, we will contact you, see where you are, and we will promote what you have. So we've got this last poll here. And maybe whoever's left can rethink if you're going to bring this to reality, and if we can help you do that. And I know that there are people that have reached out in the past. And so, we would like to help you. As Erin said, it's about PR, and we will share that. And we have no problems with any entomology related podcasts because we're all different. There's something for everyone. It'd be great if it was all bugs all the time in my ears. Not literally.
And you can follow up with any of us afterwards if we missed something that you wanted to hear more about, or if you want to get more information on any of these different steps, where I'm happy to try and help. It's one of my favorite things is to try and show people how to do podcasts, because I think everybody can have a podcast. It's the great unifying voice of the internet. Some podcasts probably don't deserve to exist, but that's a conversation for a different day. So let us know if you need any help, if we missed anything today. And if you do start one in the next couple of months, we want to talk about it on Arthropod, and we want to build a little entomology podcast network. I think that would be a lot of fun. So let us know.
Looks like there's one more question from Claudio if you want to entertain it. Because I'm curious too. What about in the field recordings? Like, I'm assuming not like when the conditions are really great.
I've never done one outside in the field, but if you were willing to get a good windscreen on your mic, if you could find a semi-protected area, the closest I've ever gotten to that is doing the guerrilla type podcasting at ESA, where we're just like wandering around the exhibition hall, sort of chasing after people to get them to talk to us. And you have to do a lot of post editing. You're going to do a lot of sound removal, and you might miss out on some things. But I think as long as you're upfront about it when you post the episode and say, this was recorded in a cotton field, and you might hear some dips and clips in the audio, then people are usually willing to forgive it.
I think for that too, if you're going to do some audio like on your phone or through like a voice memo or whatever, you would want to have, or a video, I recorded on a video, have a lavalier microphone. So it goes right into your phone. And so that's just getting your voice, and then that would help. And then you put that audio into the Audacity, between all the other stuff.
Yeah, I have done a few where I'm the interviewee. And so someone has asked me to join them in the field to kind of talk about what I'm doing. And I've had the lapel type microphone that is like a Bluetooth, so it's wireless, but it sends it to a receiver that's on their phone, or sometimes they have more expensive equipment. But the wind is the biggest thing. So if you can find, like Jonathan said, an area that's protected, and to know that if there's like a plane that flies over, because there always will be when you're doing a recording, is to just stop. And like if you have to take a 30-second break and then either repeat yourself or kind of just keep going, to know that like that person can trim and sort of edit some of those things that happen that you can't control.
I posted a lavalier that's like standalone, records all to the device, and I use this for teaching in the field. And I'm constantly amazed by how well it like blocks out wind and some other things. And so I put that in the chat as well. It's it's a little more spendy, but I feel like it gives you an audio file, but it's pretty clean, as clean as you can when it's windy and all these other things are going on. But it's going to be very specific to who's wearing it. So I like Jody's idea of, you might have one for yourself, but then if you're interviewing somebody else, and if you're trying to do this during COVID and you want to keep your distance, then you have to think about those things. But anyway, I threw that in the chat if you're interested. Awesome. Well, I think, I can see why we've had you back for 3 years now, because you.
Usually what we do is we interview the people. We don't talk about how to make the podcast as much as we do get an episode out of it. But
yeah, we make a podcast.
It would be hard to do this year.
Awesome. Yeah. So the next one is at 2 p.m. Eastern from Zoom to Facebook Live. Kayleigh will be running that one, and I'm looking forward to that as well. Lots of cool stuff to learn. So if you're interested, because you missed some things in here in the chat or whatever, this is being recorded. Hey, there'll also be an audio file if you want to turn that into a podcast. See what I did there? So this is being recorded. I can share that with you. But that'll also be then linked to the online program. So there'll be a YouTube link in there. We'll get those once they're ready. But in case you missed it, or you want to share it, get some others excited about podcasting. I like that network idea. I think that's super cool. So awesome.
Thank you, Jody, Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And awesome.
Okay, everyone, be the nerd.
I know. Go be the nerd.
Erin,
That's your
I'm
assignment.
wearing my old shirt, my Beat Nerd shirt. I
I wore
found
mine
it.
yesterday. I have my pin on today. I don't know if you can see my little pin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm
I was looking to say
Awesome.
product placement. That's what I was going to write earlier, but I forgot. Product
I'm
placement.
so thirsty. I'm going to listen to my podcast and at my ESA meeting, reading Amy and Caleb's new publication and drink my water and listen to my soybean pest podcast. But
Awesome.